We haven't defined yet the definition of republic versus democracy. In a democracy, everybody can vote, and no matter what they decide, that's what we go with. In a republic, a constitutional republic like our founding fathers gave us, it doesn't matter how many people vote on your rights. That vote is null and void. The Constitution is supposed to step in, the Bill of Rights, and say, I'm sorry, you can't do that. If you want to vote on my property rights, it's a waste of time, or my gun rights, because even if you get a majority, those rights are individual. Now, on the communist side, they'll always talk about collective rights. You see, that is a ruse in order to get you to give up your individual rights. All rights under the Constitution are individual rights. It's interesting, though, that they're always pushing democracy, 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 and that's because they know it's the road to socialism. And so, as you could see in the last segment, the Republicans kept saying, let's vote. We want the right to vote. I don't want the right to vote on my rights. The only reason we voted to get rid of the growth policy is because it was the only method we had to repeal it. But I don't ever want to vote on my rights. So this is Frederic Bastiat, and he's a French economist. He wrote this really awesome book, The Law. Everybody should get a copy. It's a short book. You can read it in just a couple of hours. But it really helps define what is property and what is just and unjust with property. And so with individual rights, the reverse of that is individual wrongs. And so, for example, if it's wrong for an individual to do it, it's also wrong for a group of people to do it. There's no magic number where if enough people vote to steal from you, then it becomes right. And that's the whole premise between a collective right, is as soon as enough of them say, well, we can take your property and give it to Kmart, so they can build a Kmart, or we can, take your children and school them, or whatever they want to do. That just doesn't fly in a constitutional republic. And when an individual can't get away with it by themselves, then they hire the government to go do it for them. And Frederic Bastiat, in his book, he calls this legal plunder. And how does he define legal plunder? He says quite simply, see if the law takes from some persons what belongs to them and gives it to other persons whom it does not belong. See if the law benefits one citizen at the expense of another by doing what the citizen himself cannot do without committing a crime. So if I need funding for my business, I can't just go with a gun to my neighbor's house and say, okay, here I am, go ahead and give me a bunch of cash so that my business will be successful this year, because it was, kind of a slow season, so I need you to subsidize me. Well, you can't do that, so you go to the government, and you say, well, you have guns, and you can go get the money for me. Well, this is legal plunder. You are getting the government to do an injustice for you, something that you can't normally do yourself. So under this legal plunder, Frederic Bastiat says there's only really three options. The few plunder the many, everybody plunders everybody, or nobody plunders anybody. I say we go with number 3, nobody plunders anybody. Okay, well, you're probably thinking, well, that's just a couple of rules in order to make our neighborhood look good, and we do need some control. And it's not really that big of a deal. This is what the law says. A violation of this part or any resolution adopted pursuant thereto is a misdemeanor and shall be punishable by a fine not exceeding $500 or imprisonment in the county jail not exceeding 6 months or both. So jail time to me is pretty serious. This is J.P. Pomnichowski. She was a legislator representing House District 63 in Bozeman in the 2009 Montana legislative session, and she introduced this bill And what she wanted to do is she wanted to add to the criminal part I just read you in the last segment. She wanted to add a civil penalty of $100 per violation. Now, if you take a look at the bottom, it's pretty interesting. It says each day of violation constitutes a separate violation. Now, this horrible bill actually passed the House, and we had a 50-50 House, and so it was a bipartisan effort by Republicans and Democrats, and they got it through committee and through the House, and it went to the Senate, and I'd totally missed it when it went through the House. I wasn't there to testify, and I did go testify with a bunch of other patriots in the Senate session in committee, and it was defeated there, thank goodness. But if you take a look at the bottom here, it says each day of violation constitutes a separate violation. And one of the main arguments I had in committee was that this was a violation of due process of law, because in America you have the ability to be innocent until proven guilty. Now, think of it this way. If you're in court and you're the defendant under the zoning, and the zoning law said, okay, well, you can only have a 4-foot fence in your front yard, but you go for the 5-foot fence. Well, according to this law, every day that it was up would be a separate violation. Now, if you're in court proving your innocence, and you still have your fence up, of course, then every day would be another violation, and you'd be back in court again on every single violation. So to me, this is clearly a violation of your due process of law. But thank goodness this did fail in the Senate committee.